Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock, and so long as we're technically capable, I'll get going. Noga, are we ready to roll?
We're ready.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm Mayor Josh Cohn, and it's my privilege to welcome you to the first public listening session of the Rye Police Review Committee. This is one of the committee's first opportunities to gain public input and is a very exciting occasion. It's also a good occasion to introduce the committee. Better said, I'll reintroduce the committee, having spoken of it previously at a city council meeting. First, what is the committee? The committee's been organized pursuant to the governor's executive order number 203, a June response to the killing of George Floyd, among other incidents. The executive order requires each municipality in New York with a police force to, and I quote, perform a comprehensive review of current police force deployments, strategies, policies, procedures, and practice, and develop a plan to improve such for the purposes of addressing the particular needs of the communities served by such police agency and promoting community engagement to foster trust, fairness, and legitimacy, and to address any racial bias and disproportionate policing of communities of color. In other words, we, the City of Rye, are required to review our City of Rye PD against the needs of our community, with particular goals of fostering fairness and addressing issues of racial bias. Allow me to emphasize, this is a review of the City of Rye Police Department only, and not a review of policing generally in Westchester or elsewhere, and not a review of the county police, the state police, or the police departments of our neighboring jurisdictions, all of which agencies may act in Rye from time to time. This is a review against the needs of our community, which we may think of as primarily the residents of Rye, but also includes the people who work in Rye, visit Rye, or travel through Rye. Our PD may also act on occasion in our neighboring jurisdictions. We're a small city, but a small city in a busy and cosmopolitan part of the world. We must have a police department able to fulfill its role appropriately in this setting. So how do we as a small city undertake this difficult review? New York State published a guidebook to the process, which you can find linked at the city website location for our committee. The web address for the committee will appear shortly on this screen. This guidebook and the original executive order tapped me as mayor with the initial task of convening a committee to carry out the review. The guidebook establishes categories of committee participants ranging from members and leaders of our police department to clergy to representatives of the district attorney and the public defender, and to individuals with a variety of community ties, experiences, and affiliations too. And again, I quote, to bring a broad range of the perspectives, experiences, knowledge, and values of our community. I've tried to bring together a broad range of people in a group of practical size, at least roughly reflecting our demographics to fulfill this mandate. I've also sought out two leaders to serve as co-chairs of the committee, each of whom has long living experience in community involvement in Rye. They're Guy Dempsey and Lisa Dominici. Guy, an attorney and chair of the City Landmarks Committee, and Lisa, presently the executive director of Rye Youth Council. My thanks to both of them for taking on this important work. I'll turn this over to Guy and Lisa shortly to talk more about the actual workings of the committee. Before I do, however, let me share a little more about the mandate of the Guidebook. Our committee is, in short, to gather information on how our police department currently operates, conduct public outreach, explore and discuss the many topics set forth in the Guidebook to the extent relevant to our police department, draft a plan for any desirable changes, put that draft plan out for public comment, and pass the finalized plan to the City Council for adoption or ratification. This is to be a transparent process. Our city's work must be delivered to Albany by April 1st, 2021. Finally, a word about our police department. We're a small city with a small police force, 37 officers. Our police force is really one of our frontline public safety agencies, and many of us have many reasons to be grateful to its men and women for their efforts over the years. That said, this task, directed by Albany, provides us, and I hope that us includes our police officers, the welcome opportunity to review our police department and assure ourselves that we, collectively, are doing all we can to correct any questionable aspects and to further enable best police practices. This will be for the benefit of all of the Rye community, including our police officers themselves. I'm now going to ask Lisa and Guy for their further comments before we fulfill this evening's most important objective, hearing from those wishing to speak about the City of Rye Police Department. Thank you all for your attention and your attendance this evening. Lisa and Guy, please.
Okay, hopefully you can all see my screen. Thank you, Josh, and thank all of you for joining us tonight. It's very important that we hear from you, the public, hear your thoughts and ideas during this important process. This session is being recorded. It is a listening session only. We'll not be engaging in discussion, but we will take note and we will take all into account what we hear and bring that in as part of the process. The City of Rye Police Review Committee is charged with collaboratively developing a reform plan, as Mayor Cohn said, with community input. We commend all the committee members and members of the police department who have been working on this process so far to look at what we're doing well here, the observations, what we're not doing well, and opportunities for the City of Rye. And I'm just going to, if I can bring a slide, it's going to work. Okay. So just to give you all a little information before we jump into hearing from all of you, the committee information, all the committee information and meeting dates and recordings of all the meetings we've already had and future meetings can be found on the full committee website. This is a URL. If you go to the City of Rye website, it's accessible actually from the homepage as well. And these slides will be accessible on that page as well. But right now, if you see this link, you can take a screenshot or write it down, but it is where all of our information will take place. During an early committee meeting, we decided that two subcommittees would be formed that would focus on specific components of the police reform and review. And those four sections included what functions should the police reform perform, employing smart and effective policing standards and policies, fostering community-oriented leadership culture and accountability, and recruiting and supporting excellent personnel. And there is detailed information about all four of those categories in the document to which Mayor Cohn discussed earlier, and which is accessible from our webpage. That's all I have to say for now, and I will hand it over to my co-chair, Guy Dempsey.
Thank you, Lisa. As Mayor Cohn has already said, we're not doing this just in a vacuum. The exercise has the fundamental objective of creating a plan for putting into place recommendations which are identified by the committee in its collaborative review of both the community's and the police view of the current state of affairs. That plan will be developed by the committee and then presented to the city council for review and certification, with the ultimate objective of getting the plan sent to Albany on or before April 1st of next year. As demonstrated by this evening's session, one critical component of the committee's work is gathering information from community members and other users of the City of Rye Police Department services, so that we can get a broad range of views on what's going on, what's happening that goes well and what doesn't go so well, so that we have a mosaic we can fit together in formulating our recommendations. These listening sessions are one important component of how we collect that information, but we also encourage members of the community and others with interest in the subject to contact us either through sending emails to the addresses shown on the website, or even an old-fashioned letter will do. But whatever it is, if you have a thought and you think it would be useful for the committee, by all means, reach out to us in some form or another so we can have that information for use in our deliberations. And I think that's it for what I had to say. So I think we're now ready to move to the meat of the order, which is to have speakers provide. So Noga, I think you're going to handle the administrative task of identifying speakers and putting them on the screen.
Right. Sorry. Let me. Oh, here we go. So in order to speak, for those of you in front of a computer, you have to click the button that says raise your hand so you can identify yourself as someone who wants to speak. And if you're on the phone, you have to hit *9. That's how you raise your hand if you're attending via phone. So I don't right now see any hands raised. Here we go. So I'm going to allow you to speak. This is Andy Ball. Please just say your name, if you can, your municipality, and then feel free to start speaking.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is Andy Ball. I assume you can hear me.
Yes.
I have no idea, based on this Zoom interface, whether or not you can see me. So I'm not much to look at, but all right. So
we can just see your name, Andy.
Got it. Wonderful. Then, well, first, listen, I would like to begin by just thanking all of you who have volunteered to be involved in this important work, especially the mayor and the council members who already give a great deal of their time in the service of the community. I also thank you for holding this session, and importantly, based on the outreach piece that I saw, the fact that all voices will be welcome, valued, and respected. Just to set the table before I make the meat of the comments I wanted to make, I just wanted to, because I know many of you. I don't know all of you. I know some of you know me, but for what it's worth, and this doesn't come up all the time, but it might matter in this context. My family has been in this town for continuously for the past 170 years. As part of that experience, we've been involved with and represented in the Rye Police Department since its formation 115 years ago. And that's been basically steady service right to the current day, in which my cousin Eddie is one of our sergeants. So my position, not surprisingly, is one that I am a strong supporter of the Rye Police Department, not simply because of my familiarity or the family history of my familiarity with the group, because I know personally many or even most of them, and these are professional men and women who do important work. You know, they do an important job very well every day and every night. They've done it in a climate that is sometimes easy and often difficult. I mean, they've weathered leadership changes over the past, 3 different leaders over the past 7 or 8 years, and they keep doing their job and they're doing their oath, right? And I support them just, as a father, a taxpayer, and as a sensible person. Basically, I value order and I value safety. I think most of us probably do and should, because without it, none of other rights matter or can endure, right? That's fairly Maslowian. I mean, personally, I commuted to New York City for 25 years, and that was, initially under the Koch administration and then Dinkins. And I personally intervened in 2 different street crimes. So 2 different episodes, which were not at all fun, but were necessary. And I saw many other criminal behaviors. And I'm here to tell you, I value what the police bring. And closer to home, I'm quite convinced that very few people in this town really have an idea of what goes on here and the things and the people that our police protect us from, right? And so that is just to sort of really to set the table quickly and initially to just let you know that is basically my belief state, right? And as I've reviewed the governor's executive order, and it is just that, it's not a product of legislation. It's basically rooted in a presumption of guilt. And I find that fairly understandable. You felt that swift action was necessary. I think I have a lot of heart for that and probably agree. But as we all know, and thank goodness I don't have to sit in his very difficult chair. He not only has to lead our state at a great time of difficulty, both societally and from a healthcare standpoint, but he has to preside over a state in which, there is problems like those in Newburgh, and he has to legislate the same way for places like the Hamptons. It's terrifically difficult, right? So of course it is. So I think that 203 is a terrifically broad brush and a fairly blunt instrument, but it does operate from a presumption of guilt. If you look at both the second whereas in the executive order as well as the 11th, it basically just says that these things are happening and they must stop. I think broadly that is probably true, and God bless them, they must stop, because I think we should all agree that an abuse of power, especially from someone who's been invested with public trust, cannot be tolerated. We got it, right? That's a fine starting point. But I would urge the committee to proceed with caution in terms of how it views these things closer to home. And further, if you'll indulge this, I would actually have an operating suggestion for you. Because for the past 15 years, from 2005 to date, it's been my privilege to serve both as an elected and appointed official in the service of RAI. And between that and my professional experience, I know how committees work. I've been on ones that have been productive and very capable, and I've been on ones that have been just the opposite. And I would strongly suggest, and I'm not familiar, and I apologize, I'm not familiar with the work and probably the good work you've all done so far together. But I would suggest that you author and agree upon a very concise problem definition. Because if you do not have a problem definition, you don't know what you're solving. And if you don't have a problem definition, it will be easy to be distracted by the winds of conversations that are happening far outside of our borders. Okay, the Executive Order 203 makes it very, very clear, right, that this is to focus on police-involved deaths and racially biased law enforcement. These are critical concerns, of course. They should be part of the problem definition, I would presume. 11 expands more broadly on that. So basically, in an executive order, the whereases are effectively the legislative intent. It shows where this thing is coming from. That's where 203 came from. The committee is mandated by 203. So in turn, it should echo, right, the language and the intent of the executive order by which it came to be.
Andy, I'm very sorry to interrupt. I'm going to ask you to pause there. Thank you very, very much for everything you said to date. One thing that we failed to say at the beginning of this was that there was going to be a 3-minute time limit on speakers. We are pretty certain that speakers will get to speak again once everyone has had their chance. So if you have more to say, I hope that you stay on this call and continue at the end, but I will we have to move on so we can make sure that everyone is heard. And I hope that we can get back to you to hear what more you have to say. I'm very sorry to cut you off like that.
So the next person I have is County Executive George Latimer. And it looks like there you go, you're unmuted.
Good, thank you. George Latimer, Rye resident, proud to say that first, and then County Executive, proud to say that second. Very briefly, I compliment the mayor and this committee for the work that you have ahead of you. It obviously matters to me in the hometown that I live in. I also want to highlight that we are going through the same process in Westchester County government. You may be aware, we created a similar committee a while ago. We've had some discussions. If it is of any value to your committee to have interactions with some of the discussions we've had, any of the public comments we've had, obviously issues that come up around the county would be by necessity somewhat different from what you might deal with just in the city of Rye. Be aware that you have access as a committee to any of the material that we have. Blanca Lopez of our team can be contacted by your committee contact and share whatever data, information, input we have. And as we start to come close to doing our report, which will go before the Board of Legislators sometime in the month of January, we'll be happy to share that with you and the other communities as well. Also, as you have your discussions, we have the unique reality because the county police is responsible for policing county parks and county roadways. There's a unique amount of county presence in the city of Rye between Playland, Reed Sanctuary, the Marshlands facility, complex with J Estate and also Playland Parkway. So if in any of your deliberations you feel that you want to reach out for specific input on those types of issues from anyone in the county government, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure that Catherine Parker will provide the same purpose and to interact, because the county police does have that kind of a unique presence in Rye because of what it is that the county police is responsible for. But other than that, we're all trying to respond to the governor's initiative. We want to do it professionally and thoroughly. And to the extent that we can be helpful to you doing it for Rye City, we're happy to do that. I wanted to extend that. Thank you very much for letting me visit with you. And I'll go on remote and listen.
Thanks you very much,
George.
Yeah, it actually has been very helpful to listen to some of the meetings that the county has had to date. So I do appreciate you also extending your resources to us.
Next, we have James Ward. James, you might have to unmute yourself. There you go.
I did. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
Hey, I'd just like to say, along with the other people that have spoke up, thank you to the council and to the mayor for doing this. I think it's, good for the city. And I would say, I've been a resident of this town for 9 years, and every interaction I've had with the police has been great. They've been very helpful. I have at least one friend who on the police force, but I don't think anyone's above some kind of check, and this is where our society is. And I think we should use it as a chance to build our community and bring people together. And I would hate for it to take a divisive turn. And I hope that we can, as citizens of the community, we can all kind of work together to better our community and not look at it as us against them or whatever they could devolve into. So again, thank you very much. And I'll just yield the remaining of my time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So next we have Carl Frederick.
Hi, my name is Carl Friedrich. I am a resident of Rye. My wife and I moved here about over 20 years ago, raised our 4 children here. And I want to lend my support to the police. One of the many reasons we moved to Rye was the sense of community, the safety we felt upon moving here and raising our children, largely provided by the police and the fire department. And we've been very proud to call this place our home and feel that the police here do an excellent job. I don't negate the problems that exist in policing in general, but I feel like the governor's statements that paint us with a broad brush are completely misguided, and I rebuke them completely. I think that there are problems in our community with policing. I have the opportunity with my consulting business to be in Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn every day of every week, and there are big problems. But my opinion is, in the wake of all the terrible things that have happened nationally, that there's been police enforcement has been diminished, not only in the city, but here in Rye as well. It's my opinion that there's less active policing. There's been an increase in crime, which I think is bled into our community from other areas. And I feel that there's a sense of inevitability that this is just not the way it is. I also take issue with New York State's, and you excuse the expression, catch and release process of releasing people back into the communities after they've committed crimes. And it's here in Rye now in a way that, in my opinion, never existed in the past. And I think the police need some form of support so they can protect us and serve the community without feeling, the diminishment of their power and their authority here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Natalie Auerbach.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to ask a quick question.
Oh, you went on mute again.
Natalie, you're on mute.
Now is it working?
No.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I liked what was said before about, this is a great way for us to take a step back and look at what's happening in our town. And one of the things we don't want is for this to be divisive. And I wanted to ask a question about if there will be any kind of cultural inclusion seminars or if there's going to be any kind of sensitivity training. And I just want to reference, I know that there was a Blue Lives Matter picture that was put up by a police force. And I don't, I think that could, while it's really lovely that people created gifts, I think that it can be taken in different ways. And so I'm just wondering if there's going to be, what kind of, or are we doing any kinds of classes with psychologists? I just, one of the things that I know about police forces here versus other countries is that it's, there just isn't as much focus on, on long-term psychology and things like that. So I was my question.
Thank you for your question. I don't see actually any other hands up. If you're on the phone, you'd have to hit *9 to raise your hand. If you're on the computer, you have to hit this raise hand button. Okay, here we go. Robert Byrne.
Robert, you were on mute. Oh, there you go.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a question. I'll address it to Mr. Dempsey since I know him fairly well. Guy, does your committee include any representation from the Rye Police PBA?
The session tonight is not meant to be a Q&A session particularly, but I will happen to answer that one because it's easy. The police chief and head of the PBA are both members of the committee.
That's great. I asked the question only because I think your committee, should its deliberations result in recommendations that in any way suggest changes in the terms and conditions of the police force, you're going to find that those are what's called under the Taylor law mandatory subjects of bargaining. And I think you need to keep the city's labor council, who I believe is Vincent Toomey, apprised of any recommendations you want to make. And you may want to make him aware of those confidentially. Just a suggestion.
Thank you for that perspective, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Councilwoman Pam Tarlow.
Hi, thank you for taking my call, and thank you all very much for doing this. I'm calling because personally, I live on Midland, And one of the things that I have seen is particularly when Playland is open, there are a lot of kids, I think, that get off the train, maybe 16, 18, 20-year-old kids. And there are regular stops on Midland. Oftentimes, these are kids of color. I don't know if they deserve it. I don't know what's happening, but it is actually become a joke in our house that you're walking Midland while black. And I would like to explore, hopefully you guys, to explore whether there are some there's a statistical analysis of more stops. First of all, when Playland is open. Second of all, of kids that are getting off the train. What are the race of the kids that are getting stopped? Because I truly believe that there's something happening there. I would also like to see this a little data driven. I recognize that you're asking me for my view of the police, which I happen to have a personal, wonderful view of the police. I think they do a wonderful job. But I would be curious to know, from a data standpoint, how many lawsuits have been filed against our police in the last 10 years? How many motions to suppress have been filed against our police in the last 10 years? Have they been won? Have they been lost? What kind of training do we get? How does that compare to the national level of training? I'd like to see a conversation about what things our officers, like just our officers, sitting and telling us what they think they need, maybe even without management, council, whoever there. What do they need to get their job done better? I'd like to hear that as well. And I'd like to say that this is not a repudiation of our police. I think this, or the governor, in terms of why we're doing this. I believe that this is an opportunity for us to explore what we perceive our police to be and what we want them to be. It's a visioning of who they are to us, because they're quite important. And I suspect that we're going to come back, you'll come back with recommendations that will eventually approve, like things like there maybe needs to be more training, or there needs to be more I don't know, training in particular. There's one other thing, I'm close, 8 seconds. We had an issue last month, 2 months ago, where a statue got hit. It was a high-speed chase, 4 a.m. And our police officers, I'm sorry, I will stop. Our police officers were pursuing a property crime, a stolen vehicle. That's the kind of stuff that we need to understand, why we would end up with cars all over the road at 4 a.m. in a dangerous situation. In most other jurisdictions, that would not happen. Property crimes don't require high-speed chases. That's a training issue, I think, probably. So anyway, I'm hoping you guys do all of that work, and I'll get off. Sorry.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Next, we have Nathaniel Dean.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel Dean. I have lived in Rye since I was 4 years old, and I'm now 23, so a while. I went to elementary, middle, and high school here, and have lived here after college. And personally, I do not have any problems with the police department, and I do support them, but I don't think that means that we should close ourselves off to review and building upon what we already have. I also just want to take a moment to really echo Pam's points. I think that it's really important that this is data-driven and that we really take a deep dive here, because I don't think this is something that we've done on this level before, and it can be really productive and really helpful. And lastly, I just want to say that I really think that this is a moment for RIDE to come together as a community and produce something positive instead of pointing fingers and splitting ways. So, yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. As of right now, there are no more hands raised. Again, you have to hit the raise your hand button if you're on a computer. Oh, here we go. I think can we go back to Andy Ball, since he's the only one who has his hand raised?
Sure.
Good. I'm unmuted. I'm sorry to circle back, but just to complete the thought, because again, like so many of the other people that have commented and been very, very supportive. I certainly have no interest in making this in any way divisive or negative, but we cannot ignore the very simple fact, right, that the fact that the committee, as you've stated, your charge is to develop a reform plan. Therefore, it's tautology. It is self-evident that reform is needed. If indeed you find that it is needed, please bring it on. We'll be very interested to see what reform is in fact needed, for which you would need to, again, have a problem definition that would allow you really to understand where you would probe, to cite the problems and then create the necessary remedies. Right? I mean, it's preordained. A reform plan is needed, right? If a reform plan is needed, that means reforms are needed. Very interested to see where what the committee identifies, right, as those reforms. And that's all I have to say, other than thanking you all once again for your good work and for conducting this session. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got no hands currently raised.
We have a hand raised.
Raise your hand if you're on the phone. Oh, here we go. John Slocum.
Hey, this is John Slocum. Thanks for taking the time. I have lived in Rye since 2003 after moving here from Manhattan. I've had to call on the police department, unfortunately, 4 times. And in those times, the Rye Police Department has responded both professionally and very quickly, frankly. So I am very supportive of the Rye Police Department. I appreciate the previous caller's notion that we might need some reform or that there should be some reform done. But frankly, from my perspective, I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. I feel very safe here. I think my children feel very safe here, and I think I feel very privileged to live in this community and have my children go to school here. So thank you very much for the work that you guys are doing. And I would just ask you to keep it up. Thank you. I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, John.
Again, no hands raised. *9 if you're on the phone. Still don't see any hands.
In the meantime, while we're waiting, I will, for those who are participating on this webinar, I'd like to share a screen because it is important. Part of this process is a survey that this committee has created. It's live. It's being fielded in both Spanish and English for residents and for people who visit our community. And it's very important that we hear from as many people as possible. So if you're looking at this screen and you see these QR codes, which are those boxes with the funny lines, you can literally take your cell phone, open the camera, and point your camera at one of the boxes. The box on the left is in English, and the box on the right will bring up the survey in Spanish. A link will appear on your phone. You click the link and you take the survey. You'll also see the URLs to the survey, which are accessible from the Police Review Committee website on the city government on site. So please, these surveys are being disseminated in many ways. If you're a Rye resident, you'll be getting a postcard in the mail with these QR codes and links to the survey. But we are hoping that we get thousands and thousands and thousands of responses because it's one of the really easy ways that we can get honest input from the public, which is very important to us. And also, I will just let people know that the next public listening session is right now scheduled for Thursday, January 7th from 6 to 8 p.m. It will be a very similar format. So please put that down. Think about things that you might want to ask or share during that. But always, we are open to hearing people's views and comments and ideas at what is the email address, Guy? I'm blanking right now.
I don't recall off the top of my head. You have to look at the website.
PD review at ryny.gov. So you can send any comments to PD review at ryny.gov.
There are no.
And also, I'm sorry, I know we're not answering questions, but just to get to Natalie, if you look at the link to the document that was put forth from the governor, there's an entire section on training and continuing education, and that's one of the areas that this committee is reviewing and looking at closely. So, and supporting our police department and to be, the best they can be in those situations as well.
Before we go, I'd like to thank the city staff for all the support they've given the committee and particularly in helping us put on our first public listening session.
Thank you, Josh. There are no more raised hands that I can see. Going once. Going twice. Okay, Lisa?
All right, I think we're adjourned. Thank you for all for participating.